Okay, this section we're going to talk about evaluation of the X-ray system. And by that, we already talked about how the X-rays are produced, how the X-ray tube works, how the DR plate works. We know that flat panel DR is probably the best way to go when you're purchasing X-ray equipment. So now we have an image that's formed on a computer, but now we got to talk about the rest of the system that goes with the digital process and what do we do with that image besides trying to interpret it. So it all has to depend on the software that's on the computer that comes with the X-ray machine that interfaces and talks to the X-ray tube and the X-ray machine itself. So that's the integrated computer software. And then we have to talk real briefly. We're going to very briefly mention this stuff called DICOM and PACS and an acronym called HIS. So a bunch of little acronyms in there that all kind of work together, but it all goes together to form this software system that enables us to look at images and manipulate those images and send them around to different places in your hospital, to your exam room, or can you look at them on your phone? Can you look at them on your iPad at home? When you're in Europe, can you look at them anywhere you want? So all of this takes place kind of behind the scenes, but you need to know just the basics of it. That's what we're going to discuss. All right. So there's much more to evaluate when you're purchasing a digital X-ray system than just how to get the image. And that's what we've talked about only so far. So again, you have to look at, is that image easy to get? Again, the DR systems, the image is easy to get. You can have the techniques you don't have to be so precise that you used to have to do with film analog systems. So you can have a much more easy and forgiving technique chart and still get a good image. You have to look at the image latitude or the dynamic range. Again, you want to look at the image just like we saw of that dog paw and the dog's humerus, the digital one that showed all of the images. Is there any part of that image that you can't see? Is there any part like the analog films that are totally black and you can't see anything? And there are other parts that look good. Ideally, you want the entire image to look fantastic. When you're evaluating the software, it's just like any other software. It's like PowerPoint or any other thing. Is it easy to use? Is it intuitive? Or is it so complicated? You have to take a couple of classes to learn how to use it, and then you forget how to use it. So you want software that integrates with the system and the images to be relatively user-friendly and easy to use. You want to avoid any kind of digital artifacts. One thing that the radiologists discovered when we all went digital is it introduced a whole bunch of new artifacts that we have to watch out for. And we really don't have the scope to get into all of those, but you want to avoid these digital artifacts. And then you want, for lack of a better term, you want good stuff that happens automatically behind the scenes. So you want, if you have the primary beam and you're adjusting the knobs on your X-ray tube and you have a primary beam that's 8x10, ideally, you would want the software that will crop that image down and find the edges of the primary beam and cut out everything that's not in the primary beam. Okay, some of the good software and the good machines that does that automatically for you. You want to have what's called hanging protocols. You want to have the images oriented the right and the same way every time on your computer monitor. So all that stuff, that a lot of the times that stuff, that auto stuff, that auto crops, that processes the images behind the scenes and makes them all look pretty and orients in the same way. That's some of the stuff that you'll pay a little bit extra for that the cheaper DR systems don't do for you. And you end up doing it yourself and you end up doing it manually, which takes time and mouse clicks. And that doesn't sound that bad, but it gets old and have to do that by yourself all the time. And it takes time, and time is money. Okay, DICOM compatibility. We want to make sure that the machine that you have is fully DICOM compliant. And we're going to talk a little bit more detail about what DICOM is. Has anybody have y'all heard the term DICOM? Okay, well, some of you maybe have. It's a very common term that if you're introduced to it now, it's not going to be the last time you're going to hear that acronym, which we'll talk about a little bit more. So again, some of these differences are very subtle, like the auto stuff and is it fully DICOM compatible? But also some of them are really, really important. So you want to make sure that whatever system you have, everything works together and it will result in a good image that you can store and send around different places. Two terms that we probably need to settle out here too: image processing and image manipulation. And there's a difference. Image processing is what the computer system does to the image behind the scenes before you even ever see it. So that's stuff like auto cropping and adjust. It's a lot of the good systems will adjust the brightness and contrast and make them look perfect before they even pop up in that on that computer monitor. So in that 3 to 6 seconds when you're waiting for the image, all of this image processing is taking place behind the scenes inside the computer. And then once it finishes the image processing, it shows you the image. Okay. Some of the cheaper systems do little to no image processing. Okay. Image manipulation is what you do after you see the images on the computer. So this is things like flipping it around 90 degrees or counterclockwise 90 degrees, or flipping it horizontally, or adjusting the brightness and contrast with your mouse. Okay. That's you manipulating the image. It's different than the computer processing the image. Okay. So again, we want to look at the dynamic range. Look at the dynamic range of this dog. This is, again, an old analog type film. And if I'm looking at this image of this dog, do I see, is there every part of the anatomy in the collimated beam that I can see? Okay, no, there's not. You see there's up in the lumbosacral region, up in this area, up in here, you can see there's a bunch of bony buildup. We'll talk about that. That's called spondylosis. But you can see this area in the spine really well. I can see most of the pelvis really well. I can see this part of the abdomen, but I can't see this part of the abdomen. It's like it's not there. And I sure can't see anything in the stifle joints, right? Okay. So if I'm looking at that, again, that's not an ideal image. We would want an image where we can see everything on the same image at the same time would be the ideal thing. And so if we have a good digital system, again, you should be able to see the entire image at the same time. So now we go from this. Now it's the opposite extreme. Now we can kind of see the femurs, but we still can't see the stifles, but now I can't even see the pelvis. I can adjust it even more and manipulate it. Now I can see the stifles, but I can't see the pelvis. What we really want is an image that looks like that. Can everybody see the difference? Ideally, that's what you want, because now I can see everything. There's nothing on this image anywhere that I can't resolve, that I can't see, that's going to provide me useful diagnostic data. Okay. So we want the images to come out first time, every time. Every time you press that button, you want the images to come up correctly exposed where there's everything in that field of view that you can see. You want to minimize how much you have to manipulate the image yourself with the mouse. You don't want to have to rotate it, flip it, adjust the brightness, contrast. Ideally, every time it should come up first time, every time, and be a nice, perfect image. And again, the really nice digital systems will do that. The cheaper ones don't do that. Not all DR system, just because you buy a DR panel, and I told you that's the way to go, but like everything else, and like if you go out to buy a car, there's different types and brands of cars, okay? They all run on gas, but there's some of them that are better than others. And again, you tend to get what you pay for. So let's just look at some examples of this. This is from a system of a dog's paw that you can see, and this was bought as a DR system, okay? Would you be happy with that image? That's the way it comes across. I don't think it looks very pretty. Okay, it's kind of gray. The image is, even at this stage, you're not even blowing it up yet, but it looks kind of grainy. The edges are kind of ugly. It's not a really pretty image. So this is one of those images typically that you'll see from one of these DR systems that's CCD based. So it's not really a flat panel detector. It's one of these, I got a camera underneath the table and I take the image. Okay, so you have to be wary of that and make sure that you don't end up wasting money on that. There's another one here. Here's a cat. And again, they're doing a whole bodyogram or a catogram, which typically you shouldn't do. You should do one cavity, thorax or the abdomen. But here they're doing the whole catogram. Okay. So if I'm looking at something in the abdomen's not that bad. It's still kind of grayed out, but it's still not that bad. But what about the lungs? Okay. Up in this part of the cat, I can't see a whole lot going on in the lungs because it's so black. Okay, I can try to manipulate that now with my mouse and adjust the contrast, but when I adjust it to make this part probably better, it's going to make this part too light. Ideally, again, you want to have the whole thing look this really good at the same time. Okay, here's another image. Would you be happy that you just dropped 30 grand on this system? Okay, is there any part of this image that looks like crap that you can't see? Yeah, about half of it. Okay, this part in the chest looks pretty good. I don't know what's going on here. It's some kind of digital artifact that's really grainy and I really can't see anything. And this looks horrible up in here. I don't know what's going on here. So, again, unfortunately, I've seen too many veterinarians go to these shows and they shop around, and the vendor person sitting behind the desk will talk them in. Well, doc, why are you going to spend 50 grand on that system over there when you can get the same thing here for 30 grand? And in reality, this is the kind of thing that makes a difference. Do you think that that vendor that's selling the cheap DR systems, do you think they're going to bring images to the show that look like this? No, they're going to bring maybe the only 3 that they've ever done that look really good. And those are the ones they're going to show you. Okay, here's another DR image of a dog's skull. Okay, I can see the bones, but it looks like it's looked like a cadaver skull, like out of your bone box. There's no soft tissues around it at all. You can't see them. Okay, so again, that is poor image quality. And so I got lots of examples in that, and kind of killing a dead horse. Now, this is another one here. This one here is a bad DR system. This is L7 in the lumbar vertebrae. Can I tell you if that's truly lytic, if he's got something aggressive inside that bone that's making it look dark and look like that, or is it some type of artifact? And the answer is, in this case, it was just an artifact. There were some pixels that were bad on their DR detector that didn't work right, okay? And so you got to be real careful with that. You don't want to go biopsy that L7 and think there's a tumor that's living in that vertebral body, and it comes to find out it's just because you bought a cheap DR system. So again, you get what you pay for. Here's another example. This is another digital detector, and it's got some of the detector modules or little scintillators that are out, and it doesn't work. So is that a real lesion or is that an artifact? In this case, it was an artifact. You have to be real careful. Okay, PACS and DICOM. PACS is an acronym that stands for Picture Archival and Communication System. Okay. And so a PACS system is a software system, and the hard drives in a computer that store images for you. Okay. So a PACS system is where you will archive and store all of your digital x-rays. If you have ultrasounds, you'll store them on your PACS system. If you have CT that you have in your clinic, or that you send a dog out and then they can send you the CT image, you can store those on your PACS system. So it's the software that stores images and then has the ability to catalog those images. You can search those images by the date. You can search them by Fluffy. You can search them by the dog's last name. So it catalogs and finds images. So it's basically a big database for all medical images. And the PACS systems are universally used around the world for anything on the human side, and now on the vet side as well. So PACS system replaces hard copy films back in the old days. You don't have to, back in the old days, we'd put the films in a film, like a sleeve, a paper sleeve or a cardboard sleeve, and you'd have to file them. You'd file them in alphabetical order. You'd lose them, you'd give them to the clients and they'd lose them. And then you get in a lawsuit or upside down with somebody, and, and then the films from 3 years ago are gone. You can't find them. Stuff like that. So it was a bad deal. Well, PACS gets rid of all that. Everything's stored digitally. You can search for it, you can find it. Okay, you don't have to worry about losing it. The ideal PACS system will have more than just storage. It allows you to do manipulation too. So you can go back, even if the image was taken 2 years ago, and you can adjust it, you can flip it, rotate it, stuff like that. The full PACS system, and you have to be careful with some of the vendors that when they sell you these systems too, is a full PACS system will let you do image manipulation, rotate, flip it, for any kind of medical modality, not just x-rays. So if you have ultrasound video clips, it will play video clips of ultrasounds. If you have CT and MRI, you can do what's called stack imaging. So it is full PACS system will allow you to manipulate properly any kind of medical image there is, whether not just x-rays. Unfortunately, in veterinary medicine, some of the vendors will sell you what's called their PACS, but it will not, all it will do is x-rays. It's a picture viewer, and it will only show x-rays. It will not show anything with ultrasounds. It won't play video clips with ultrasounds. You can't do any CT or MRI viewing. And even if you don't have CT or MRI in your practice, you're probably at some point going to send an animal out for it, that then you can get the images back and you can look at them. Okay, so it's still important. Okay, PACS and DICOM. So where does DICOM come in? DICOM is another acronym that stands for Digital Image Communication in Medicine. Okay, and so with DICOM, it's really it's the acronym's not really right, but they couldn't digital image communication in medicine, but they couldn't put the I instead of the O because then it would be DICOM and that wouldn't be too good. So it was DICOM, and so they made it go as DICOM. So anyway, we won't go into that. So what is DICOM? Probably in the early 1980s, CT and MRI started to flourish, and all the big vendors that were making CT and MRI machines like GE and Siemens and Philips and Toshiba and all those guys, they were saying, okay, if you want to look at these images, you have to buy our CT machine made by GE, and you have to buy a viewing station that knows how to read these images and display these images. It's proprietary software. So the GE viewing stations and computers would only be able to see images that were obtained from a GE CT machine or ultrasound machine or MRI, okay? On the other hand, if you have, wait, where'd I go? On the other hand, if you had a Toshiba ultrasound machine, you couldn't look at them on a GE viewing station. You had to buy a Toshiba viewing station. And finally, the radiologists got tired of that crap. And they said, y'all aren't going to control how we look at the images. We are going to control it. And so they came up with this standard called DICOM, to where DICOM makes the vendors standardize the output of their images to a certain standard, which is the DICOM standard. And then they can be looked at with any vendor's machine can be looked at with any viewing station. So that's the way it is now. So I can look at these images if I have a Mac or if I have a PC. It doesn't have to be made by Philips. It doesn't have to be made by GE. Okay. So finally, the radiologist said, we've had enough. We're not going to put up with that anymore. And y'all are going to conform to this DICOM standard. And eventually all of the vendors had to do that. And that's the way it is now. And so that's really cool. It evolved over time. It got better and better and better. The latest one is the DICOM 3 standards. There's actually a worldwide committee that regulates this, that changes it, that improves it, that gets rid of bugs. And it works all over the world. So the cool thing about DICOM is that I can sit here in Houston and I can take an image of a dog and I can send them to anybody in Iran, and they will go through, as long as I have their computer information, they'll go through and the image quality is just like I'm seeing them here. There's no degradation. They can manipulate them. And the cool thing about DICOM is if you think about the images, if I was going to email you an image of my dog, what are you going to get? I'm going to attach it to the email and you're going to get a JPEG image of my dog. Does that image tell you my dog's name? Does it tell you the dog's sex, how old the dog is, if there's anything wrong with it? No. But the thing about DICOM is so much more goes with it than just the images. So every time you send a DICOM image, there's thousands of what's called DICOM tags. And it's like these little bricks inside this Death Star Lego thing. And every brick has an assignment. So in that little hole right there, let's go back to that little hole right there, that may be the assignment for that DICOM tag that is assigned specifically for the dog's first name. This one down in here, this little hole might be for the dog's last name. That one's for the dog's sex. This one's for the dog's address. This one's for the telephone number of the owner. This one may be for the type of machine it was acquired on. This is the time that it was acquired on. That's the date it was acquired on. So every time I send a DICOM data set to Iran or to Cayman or wherever, not only do you get the patient's images, but you get all of the information that comes with it. And it's all part of that big DICOM shell. So it's pretty cool. Okay, so there's specific DICOM tags. We talked about that. There's specific ones for the last name, pet's name, age, sex, modality, the brand of the machine, acquisition date and time, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so how do you know if your system is DICOM compatible? Again, I want to be able to send my x-rays from my x-ray machine, no matter what brand it is, to your DICOM viewer so you can view those images no matter where in the world you live, no matter what brand you have, right? And so I want to make sure that it will work. When I try to send the images, it'll work. So the thing about DICOM testing is you want to make sure that it's independent, okay? For instance, if I had a x-ray machine from IDEX, and it's an IDEX machine, and they say, you say, well, is this DICOM compatible? And they, sure it is. I can send my images. I'll show you right now. We have a customer on the West Coast in California, and I'm going to send my images from Maine. and we'll call them and see if they get the images and if it has all the patient information. So I'm going from an IDEX system to an IDEX system. Okay, right there, that should raise a big red flag, because that's not independent testing for DICOM compatibility. What you want to do is go from somebody that has an IDEX system to somebody that has something, any other brand but IDEX, and make sure they get them. So independent testing to make sure it comes across. And most of these images will come, and most of these systems will come with what's called a DICOM conformance statement. It's actually a piece of paper that will tell you that here's the specifics that we have tested this, and we will guarantee it will work. Okay. Some of the cheaper systems will not have a DICOM conformance statement because they haven't tested it, because they know it's not going to work. Okay. So you want to make sure that whatever system you buy, that it has a PACS compatibility, that it stores the images and you can catalog them and search. And also it has DICOM conformance to where you can send those images to a radiologist or to a colleague or around the world or to your home and look at them on your phone. Okay. So what do you need to be able to send images from point A to point B anywhere in the world? With DICOM, you need 3 pieces of information. You need what's called an AE title, and everybody's different. These are all different, and you can assign it when you buy your system or whatever you want it to be. Okay. You also need an IP address on where the images need to go, and a port number. If you have those 3 informations, if I call, a radiologist that's in France, and I want to have him look at these dogs' images, all I have to say is, can you send me your DICOM information? He'll send me this, that, and I can set my machine up to send them to him. Okay, and it will go flawlessly. And not only does it send the images, all of the patient's information with it. It's really cool stuff, but you have to be a little weird to understand it or think it's cool. Okay, so the last part that we need to talk about is disaster recovery. So again, like any computer system, it's not a matter of if your hard drive is going to crash, it's a matter of when your hard drive is going to crash. The images that you have in your practice are part of the medical record. By law, you have to keep those images for a specified period of time, which will vary from state to state. But in general, it's about 5 years at least that you need to keep the images in case something happens and somebody gets crossways with you. Okay. And so you want to be able to back up those images just like you do with your computers at home. You can back them up to different, file services that you can back them up. You can put them on a portable hard drive that's in your clinic. You can back them up to the cloud. That all works really well. And you can do the same thing with DICOM images, but you can't, once you back them up, if you do it that way, you can't search for them. You can't just say, I want to go find Fluffy Jones, because the file names are scrambled. Okay, so most of the people that back up the PACS, their PACS system will do it to a PACS server, a specific radiology PACS server, and you back them up. And that way, if your system crashes, you can get all of your images back, and they're still unchanged, the same quality with the same names, and you can still search by them, by catalog them. Okay. Okay, so again, if you're going to make a decision about trying to buy imaging equipment, I would recommend that you ask a radiologist. Not the person down the street, not the person that just got a system. Probably in general, if you want to ask a colleague down the road if they like their new digital x-ray system, I wouldn't ask the person that spent the money on it, because again, even if they don't like it, there's a good chance they're not going to tell you that. I would ask the technician that uses it, or the technician that hangs around the owner of the practice that hears him cussing it out because it doesn't work right. Okay. The best way, though, is if you're going to buy something, ask a radiologist about imaging equipment. Ask a surgeon about surgical equipment. Ask an internist about endoscopy and, what medicines to use, right? But if you're going to buy imaging equipment, I would ask a radiologist to get their opinion. Okay, last but not least, and this is kind of fun, this will wet your whistle. This is the last part of the boring part of radiology class. Next, we're going to start talking about, I think it's orthopedic radiology is going to be next. So, or thoracic radiology, I forget, but that's what we're going to start tomorrow. So lastly, why is radiology the best? Okay, so I made this a while back, and did everybody, I'm old, right? Did everybody see this movie? Has everybody seen Raiders of the Lost Ark? Okay, Harrison Ford, if you haven't seen it, you need to see it. It's a good show. Okay, so anyway, with Raiders of the Lost Ark, why is so here it's radiologists of the Lost Ark, right? So Both are smart, and it's kind of very similar to Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Smart and quick-witted, at least I would hope so, right? Both are looking for that ark that's hidden beneath all kinds of tissue and surrounded by other artifacts, very similar to what Indiana Jones did in the Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I'm looking for this hidden thing in this radiograph that's surrounded by all this crap that I got to find it, right? Both must know how to use their tools at hand. You know, he had his gun and he had his whip and he knew how to use those. I know how to use manipulation and image DICOM and PACS systems, right? So, but that's not all. That's not where the similarities end, not right there, okay? We know how to celebrate when we're right, just like Marion was celebrating here, right? And we know how to handle it when we're wrong. It's kind of the same way. So we do the same damn thing, but hopefully we're not wrong all that often. Okay. Sometimes we have to deal with snakes. Okay. You'll learn going forward that some of the surgeons in veterinary medicine are the hardest people to get along with, and they have the biggest egos, just like it is in human medicine. Okay. So sometimes we have to deal with surgeons. Okay. We have to have the right tool for the right job. Okay. So we need to know if we have a dog that has bladder stones, is it best to take x-rays, best to CT it, best to MRI it, or best to ultrasound it? So we have to know which tool is the right one for that particular job, right? And we do have cool tools. So we have the most expensive tools as radiologists because we have ultrasounds, we have CTs, we have MRIs, we have PET CT, we have radiation therapy, and we have digital x-rays, and we have PACS, and we have DICOM. You can I can put somebody with an IQ of 60 and sit them in front of an ultrasound machine with the room lights off, and you see the glow from the machine and the buttons and all that, and it makes their IQ look like 40 points higher just by sitting in front of it, right? So we have cool tools. Some radiologist tools work better than other radiologist tools. We'll just kind of leave it at that. And radiologists get rewarded for being right. At least I would like to hope so. And the bottom line is the radiologists are the ones that are going to make the diagnosis. So that's why radiology is the best. So with that, let's go ahead. We'll end today. And we're going to start off tomorrow and start talking about tomorrow about whatever's next on the agenda. I don't remember exactly what it is.